Greetings from Tokyo, I'm Trip, and welcome to the Hammer of Wrath. This week, you and I are going to paint the Lion's Guard. Let's go. Thanks for joining me in the studio. Today's video is a little bit special in that 1, we're completing the Lion's Guard that came with our Primarch, and 2, it marks our first ever collaboration. But more on that in a second. Now, you might not have noticed, but the street that I was walking down in the intro was in Harajuku, the world-famous fashion and style district within Tokyo. And if you're a Gwen Stefani fan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, that half-a-kilometer strip has over 100 small boutique shops selling the latest in fashion and style trends, but where it's at is the people watching. On any given day, the street is packed with tourists and sightseers, but if you want to know what's happening with the local fashion, that's where you go. Now, speaking of fashion, the Lion's Guard that came with the Primarch in the box are actually just vanilla Blade Guard veterans. And if you know anything about how I operate, that's just not going to be good enough. If these are the Lion's Guard, they have to look the part. And I had considered kitbashing using some pieces from an old Dark Angels veteran screw that I had, but it just wasn't there. When I was trolling Reddit one day, I came across this. The Lion's Pride, an STL pack created by Greytide Studios. The sculpts are absolutely incredible, and they were exactly what I was looking for. So I reached out to the creator and we struck a deal. Now, to be clear, this video is not sponsored. They have simply generously shared the files with me for free so that I could customize my Lion's Guard and share them with the community. If you'd like to purchase these for yourself, you can find them on Cults 3D as well as My Mini Factory, and I'll have the links in the description below. So let's get started, and I'll show you how I customized my Lion's Guard. The Lion's Pride pack, incredible play on words there, very excellent, is actually full of over 100 different bits, including shields, melee weapons, shoulder pauldrons, capes, tilting shields, hooded helmets, lion helmets, and winged helmets. So I selected the bits that I wanted and printed them out on my Anycubic Photon 4K printer and began preparing the models. Now, the swords in the kit come with hands up to the wrist, so it was just a matter of snipping off the existing plastic hands. And once I had snipped the hand off, I carefully used a Dremel to clean it up, but not damage the armor over the wrist. The exception to this was the hand that I was going to use for the sergeant, who's pointing at an enemy with his sword, and the wrist is at such an angle that there's no match in the STLs. So I simply drilled out a hole in the hilt and the sword and pinned them together. As I was dry fitting the parts, I ran into my first problem. The large ornate shoulder pauldrons and the helmeted heads conflict when you use certain poses. So I ended up switching the arm pose here and reducing the shoulder pauldron by about 5% vertically. That allowed it to still fit and be glued on nicely, but it would no longer conflict with the helmet. There are some incredible backpacks in the Lion's Pride STL kit, but I've decided to use some from the Dark Angels Veterans kit. I primed the models and then began applying my base coats. I selected these really great shields from the STL pack, and I knew I wanted to give them a dark, rich red gradient. So I started with Vallejo Gory Red, and then hit them with a bright red. Using Caliban Green, I did a zenithal highlight on the models. That'll dry a lot darker, so it'll be more subtle. And then on the shoulder pauldrons, I used a lighter green, more in keeping with something you'd expect to see on a Dark Angels model. For the capes, I started with a Caliban Green, and then a lighter green along the bottom edges, and finished with a dry brush of Scorpec Green. The trick here is to use a large, soft makeup brush so that your dry brush isn't streaky. And once that was complete, I applied an all-over wash of Beal Tan Green. Now, I'm not using a lot here. I'm really using it more as a glaze or a filter. I don't want it to pool up anywhere. I just want it to unify the colors and sort of punch up that green vibrance. And to finish up the details on the capes, I'm just going through here with some purples and pinks and some purple washes to create dimensionality to the braids that are coming off the back. The last step here is to use a pink and very lightly brush the ropes so that it only catches the raised edges. And here we're doing something similar, only we're using a gold on the sergeant's cape. While I had my golds on my palette, I moved on to the shields. It's a simple 3-step recipe. I like to apply a earth tone first, and then I apply Gehenna's gold, followed by a wash of Riken Flesh Shade, and then Auric Armor Gold. And speaking of things that are golden, I'd like to take this chance to thank my patrons, our mallet bearers Adam Fox, Love, Christopher Duran, and our newest member Finn Melia, our sledgehammer bearers Cody Newton and Joshua Kreba, and of course our thunderhammer bearers Matt Mitchum, The Rascal, and Josh Hannon. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you for all your support. And lastly, if I really want to make those golds pop, I just work my way around the surfaces, catching the upper edges with Canoptic alloy. I finished the rest of the details and the shields were complete. I then mixed some Caliban green with a lighter green, and using a soft makeup brush as a dry brush, worked my way around the model, trying to catch all the edge highlights of the armor to help give it definition. You'll see on the back here, we know this is going to be covered by a cape, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Moving on to the tabards, I cover them in Caliban green, and then using a lighter green, hit my edge highlights, and then finally, a very light, almost fluorescent green to catch the highlights and the edges of the robes. Moving on to the shoulder pauldrons, just like the gold I've applied in other parts of the model, we're going to put down an earth tone, we're then going to put down Gehenna's gold, wash that with a Riken Flesh Shade gloss, and then go back in with Auric Armor Gold and Canoptic alloy to really bring out the highlights and definition. In order to make it easier to paint the tabards, I've kept the holsters separate, and then I'll just attach them using some Tamiya thin. With the bodies complete, it's time to attach the capes, and because these are made of resin, we can't use plastic glue, so in this case I'm just using some super glue, and of course the same goes for the resin shields. I love using these little tubes of super glue from the dollar store because I can use them up before they go bad and the caps get stuck on permanently. The model is really coming together, but we just need to finish the helmets and the power packs. Now, in order to make it easier on myself, instead of painting each helmet individually, I've gone ahead and stuck them to a popsicle stick using hot glue. This will keep them secure, but allow me to pop them off very easily when they're ready to be put on the model. Here, I'm just laying down a few various reds, and then I'm using some Blood Angels contrast to create shadows between the feathers. And when those are complete, I'm just going to finish the gold on the helmet using the same recipe I've used everywhere else on the model. In this case, I want to make sure I accentuate the curves, keeping the shadows along the top and actually putting the highlights on the bottom. With the helmets complete, we move on to the power packs, and because this is an elite unit, we want to put a lot of gold trim everywhere. And I've also grabbed a few bits from the Dark Angels Veteran sprue and put those on the power packs as well. I'll work my way around here with a couple different whites layering up from a gray. Now, when we go to apply the power packs, we see that there's a problem here. Between the cape and the large shoulder pauldrons, they actually don't fit. But there's an easy solve here, and we can come back to that in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and glue the helmet on first to make sure we're not creating another point that gets in the way. I remembered seeing these round elements on the sprue, so I simply took my hobby knife, shaved them off, and glued them to the power pack joint. Using some Tamiya thin, I then applied the power packs, and it worked perfectly. With that, our model is all set. Now those are Lion's Guard. Don't get me wrong, I love the Blade Guard veterans. I've painted nearly a dozen of them. They're absolutely incredible models. But when it comes to a specialized unit like this, they just weren't good enough. And so with the help of Greytide Studios, we were able to take our Lion's Guard to the next level and really theme them out. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was my genuine pleasure to make and share it with you. If you'd like to support the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. Help us get to the front page of YouTube and grow our audience. You can always join the Patreon, linked in the description below, where we have a small but growing community and a private Discord server where we share our progress every day and help each other become better hobbyists. And of course, you can always check out my t-shirt shop, bakingsodatees.com, where I create one-of-a-kind, unique designs not available anywhere else. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.